Hello, this video is a do-it-yourself video on how to replace the front axle, front wheel hub assembly on a 2001 Chev Tahoe. Any of the half-ton Chevs would be probably the same or similar. So first thing you do is and by the way, I'm going to talk about the basic tools required and then the trick that's needed to get this wheel hub bearing out of the steering knuckle. It's quite a job, and there's a trick that I'll show you. So jack it up. Put a wheel stand or a jack stand under the frame. Take the 6 lugs off for the wheels and take the wheel off. And the next thing you do is see that cover right there. Take a standard screwdriver and wedge it in the edge like this, right here, and tap it around in a few places, and it'll come right off. And underneath there is a very large axle nut. And I can't remember if it's 36 millimeter or 38, but I'll post that in the comments at the bottom of this post. So you want to take a very large strong bar and have someone, if you can, have someone sit in the car and hold the brake pedal on while you take that axle nut off. And also mark it before you take it off. So take a chisel and punch a groove in the nut and punch a groove in the surrounding area, so that when you go to put it back on, you can you know how to line the bolt or the nut back up, and also count the threads that are exposed. So that's an indicator on how far the nut goes in. But you will torque it, but that's just one of the things I do to make sure I've got it in approximately the right amount before I start to torque it. So you've taken the axle nut off, and it often helps to have someone press the brake pedal. If not, you can leave the vehicle in park or in gear and still take it off. You'll probably need a 3-foot strong bar to get that off, or a good air impact wrench, because it's pretty hard on there. So take that off. Next thing you're going to do is take the brake caliper off, and I'm assuming that folks know how to do that. And if not, I'm going to post another video on how to change brake discs, brake pads, and brake discs. So you can look for that. But real quick, you need an 18 millimeter socket to take these bolts out that hold the caliper bracket on there. So I've got the caliper out of the way and the caliper bracket out of the way. Once you take that out of the way, you can just lift the disc off. These are brand new discs, and so they come off just like that. The original ones did not come off that easy. They often corrode right around the hub, and so you have to beat them around, trying not to damage them if you're going to reuse them. And so now you're looking at the new hub. I've already completed the job, but now that I've kind of learned all the tricks, I wanted to share this video with you. So basically, after you have that axle nut out, and there's a washer behind it, take that out and out of the way. Then there are 3 bolts that hold the steering knuckle to the hub and bearing assembly. There's one there, and then there's one on the other side. And I used a 15 millimeter bolt heads. And I used a wrench to get them off, and I ended up rounding the head on one of them with a wrench, and it's a decent wrench, but still rounded it a little bit, and it was fine until I put a lot of torque on it. So I'd recommend, whenever possible, to use a socket instead of a wrench, a 6-point socket, and that I guess they were probably 12-point wrenches, I don't remember. And so 6-point socket if you can. So take those 3 bolts out, and now the only thing, and you also have to disconnect the ABS sensor. So the sensor wire runs up and along here and up underneath near the engine compartment, right on top of the shock. So I was very careful protecting these little plastic brackets that held the ABS sensor onto the upper A-arm here, or control arm. And in the end, the new sensor came with all these brackets, so I didn't have to spend that time. I wasted it saving the old ones. In the end, I could have just popped them off, wrecked them, and then used the new. Also, you always have to be careful when you take a caliper off that you don't have any weight on the hose, and try not to kink the hose. Mine probably looks like it's got a bit of a kink here, but it's really not under stress at all, and it's just resting up there. Okay, so we're all set now. We've got our ABS line off. We've got the steering knuckle, the hub bolts out, and we're ready to try and get this hub off of there. So this thing's obviously been in there for a while, and it's that's why you're replacing it, because it's worn out. And there's no such thing as pulling on it with your hands to get it out. I've seen people, since you're replacing the wheel hub here, it comes with the whole new, this is going to be all new, and the studs come in the new hub, at least in the one that I bought. I'll show you what I bought. It's a Ray Bestis professional grade. I bought it on Amazon.com. I don't remember how much it was, probably like a couple $100. There's a part number. There's another number. I don't know which is which from part number perspective, but anyway, I had done this same job on the other side last year. Oh, I'm sorry. Here we go. Here's probably the actual part number. Same job on the other side with the same product. Very happy with it, and so I'm doing the driver's side this time. So the problem is you can't really easily get at behind this hub to pull it out. So I tried pounding it on it with a hammer to try and bang this out, and it's seized in the steering knuckle. I've seen a video on YouTube where a guy beat out one of the studs, and then he put a puller in here through the hub, and then he put a nut on the puller on this side of the hub, and then he continued to thread the puller. I'm not doing a good job here. It's like a big bolt, goes all the way through and contacts the steering knuckle. So he would have rotated his hub so that with the stud knocked out, the bolt would go through, contact the steering knuckle, and he put a nut on that bolt that bottomed out against the back of this hub. And when he cranked the bolt in and cranked the nut tighter, it forced this away from the steering knuckle. So that's one way. I didn't do that. I didn't really, I could have, I didn't, I guess. So what I did was, let me get my chisel here. And by the way, be prepared to take like an hour to do this. What I did was, there's a spot here, right at the edge, and I drove my chisel in right there between the old hub that's going to be replaced and the old steering knuckle. So now what you're seeing is my new hub and my old steering knuckle. Anyway, I drove it in there, and I drove it in until I could see, some space there, right there. And then I drove it in at the top, and I guess I might have maybe damaged this little dust cover or whatever this rock cover is that protects crud from getting near the disc. I wasn't so concerned about that. So I drove a chisel in there, and just by working it back and forth in two places, you'll eventually get that hub to move out of the steering knuckle. Now, I've seen on YouTube another video that shows a device that bolts on to two of the studs, and one of the studs, two on top and one at the bottom, and it's like a lever that comes out maybe 2 feet, and you stomp on the lever or you hit it with a sledgehammer or something, and it basically, it's a catastrophic event that forces that hub bearing out of the steering knuckle. I'm not a professional, and I haven't seen that tool in person. The videos of it seem very, very, that bearing is going to come out of there. I am curious to know if there's any damage to the steering knuckle. So like the interface where the hub bearing goes into the steering knuckle, I wonder if it kind of has a tendency to make that steering knuckle no longer round or crack them. Not looking to start any negative comments from folks that are in favor of that tool. If you know about it and you like it, then certainly post and let me know that it's great. Maybe it's fantastic, but it does seem extremely aggressive in a way to get that bearing out. So anyway, pounding the chisel in various places, you'll eventually work that hub bearing right out. So here's the old one, and this interface here was what was corroded badly against the steering knuckle. And so you can see the old one is, well, there's lots of crud on it, and there was just as much junk in the steering knuckle. And so what I did was I took a wire brush, and inside the steering knuckle that was touching was also corroded. So I took a wire brush and cleaned out as much of that as I could. It's kind of a pain because the axle was in the way. And so in one case, I took the axle right out. It's, you can't really see, but there's like 8 bolts that hold the axle onto the axle flange right at the differential. So I took the axle right out of the way, and then I could get in the steering knuckle and clear all that rust out. I tried to clear the rust out without taking the axle out, and it was frustrating and not very effective. So it might be better to just take the axle out. So once you do that, you can push the bearing in basically by hand or tap it in with a hammer, and then put these hub assembly to steering knuckle bolts back in, the 3 of them. The torque on them seemed very high. It's 133 foot-pounds according to my manual, and you could see it draw this hub right in as I was coming up to the torque, and then reattach your ABS wire right up to the plug that's above your shock, and then put your axle back in and retorque the axle nut to 177 foot-pounds, and then put your cover on, put your wheels on, torque them up, and the torque for these wheels on this truck's 145 foot-pounds. But actually, I guess I missed a step by putting the whole brake assembly back on, the brake caliper and so on. But take care of that, and then you're all set. So I hope that gives you a good overview of how to change that wheel hub assembly in the most efficient way that I could find. And if others have a better idea, feel free to post it.